And let me go ahead and share my other screen. Yeah, it says. Yeah, it says that it just gave me notification that someone was waiting to be accepted, like waiting in the lobby. Anyway, yeah, it is strange because I don't see that. All right, so I left all points equal because I thought that we would be able to sort of allow you know, y'all from the FAC to divvy up the total points that we have, because we were going back and forth as to, you know, which of the 4 that we've identified will receive the points. And so everyone just has every category, main category, just has 25 points, and we can go through that and we'll determine, you know, whether or not others should be weighted higher, others should be weighted lower, whether or not the descriptors that we have under each of the subheadings sort of capture where we've been. Oh, okay, here's Kelly. And let's wait for Kelly to get in here before we continue.
Hey, I'm here. Sorry, there's screaming in the background. I'm gonna mute.
It's all right. Don't worry about it. I got a purring cat sitting next to me, so.
I apologize for being late. Our furnace has died, so it was feeling a little urgent. and it's not going to be fixed before tomorrow either, unfortunately. But back to the subject at hand.
Yep. Yeah. Make sure you're working.
I have electric, like space heaters, like small, like we were using them during our renovation when we didn't have heat in the, or we could have had heat, but we would have been heating the outdoors as well. If you want, I can bring them over to you after this meeting.
I'll come over to you and get them.
Okay.
Thank you. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll real quick through it so we can see the major categories. And we have, you know, the major building systems. We have the common space adequacy. We have the educational space adequacy. And then we have the one I say for last, which is the equity considerations. We'll tackle that one last because it is it would take up a lot of time to discuss that, and we need further guidance on it. When we were talking about the HVAC, like the major building, we went through, and I'll scroll through again, and we talked about HVAC, electrical, plumbing, fire suppression, the structure, security vestibules, code standards. One of the things that was provided by Nathan was like the ability to expand and ability for relocatables, which was sort of, they kind of go, you know, hand in hand. Whereas, you know, if we have relocatables on site that have been there, you know, longer than 3 years, then that would be sort of a location for potential addition, because of the fact that, you know, the proximity to the building, their occupancy over the years being used by staff for, you know, various educational purposes. So those two were sort of added to that. But let's go back to the top and start with the HVAC. So for the HVAC, one of the things that was discussed was the age, you know, air quality, ventilation, thermal comfort. And one of the things that you brought up, David, was, you know, is it the responsibility of this group to provide the fine tuning that's needed for these, right? Like, in other words, the group should be able to give value to the major categories, like the major building systems, and where that stands. So like that there's 4 of them, perhaps, we change it up. There's a 60, there's a 20, and then there's 2 10s. However, we come up with that. But when we get into the nitty gritty, into the details, I think that, David was kind of leaning at, maybe this should be something that the school board weighs in on as to whether or not, how the scale of age, air quality, ventilation, and thermal comfort sort of adds up to that big value. You got to turn your mic.
Yeah. Actually, if I remember correctly, I think I was thinking the other way around.
Oh,
Like, have the school board weigh in at the higher level. but
okay.
Maybe we could provide some value at the more technical level of the lower level details. I think
Okay, sure, that works. It's been a while since our last meeting, so
all right. Yeah,
my brain's a little mushy.
that's okay. No, it would be. It's nice to be able to manipulate it at the high level, but I think they're looking to us to help figure out some of this stuff so they can make the big decisions about relatively of the big categories. So.
Rosa.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things I would be concerned with is kind of the breakdown. So for me, like age of HVAC equipment is not at all on par with air quality. As some sort of measurable, and then air quality maybe I would imagine encompasses ventilation. I mean, is it air exchanges? Is it CO2? Is it, what exactly are you measuring by air quality? Is it just, filters, but, so those two, I feel like, I'm not sure, if they're different or how they're different. And then thermal comfort, I guess, again, like thermal comfort to me is important. That means it's working, right? And it's making people happy. There's not cold people here and hot people there. But I think all of those are more important values than age alone, assuming that the equipment works. I guess, so I don't know. I guess that's my big thing as to why the age thing is in there. It just doesn't seem like should automatically trigger something when the other things are the measurable things that we feel are maybe because of the age of the equipment, it's outdated. It's not, giving the right amount of air quality or ventilation or thermal comfort because of its its inherent design, versus is it going to fail next year because it's 20 years old? I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like age is maybe like a placeholder as a proxy for other factors, right? Age is an indication of efficiency and all sorts of other things. Yeah.
Right. But I guess my point though is that, like, when I see all of those grouped under something like HVAC, and so then maybe they each have some sort of amount of points, like within age, air quality, ventilation, or whatever, and that adds up to HVAC. I don't know. I don't know how, like, those things, when we want to prioritize very specific things like air quality, right? Then how that, if it's a brand new system and it's not giving you the proper air exchange, I mean, does it have to wait 20 years until it's not a new system for you to replace it? I don't know. I'm just wondering how those point things kind of work together.
So typically for HVAC equipment, I think David had stated this, age typically informs a lot of the other features, like you were saying. So if we have an older system, it probably doesn't have the ventilation or the thermal comfort requirements that newer systems have. As newer schools are designed, they're designed with dedicated outside air systems, which really dedicate ventilation to those spaces, whereas the older schools with older HVAC systems don't have that. So they don't have a dedicated outside air system. Air quality truly is It encompasses more than just ventilation. Air quality encompasses humidification, making our ability to combat mold issues in the schools so that we have proper dehumidification and humidification during the proper seasons, which sometimes older buildings do not have. They don't have the ability to dehumidify in the summertime and bring proper humidity into the wintertime during the dry months. So I think that's what really indoor air quality is. It's more encompassing than just improved filtration. So those are kind of the features when we rate replacement of HVAC equipment, our technicians look at. You know, how well does the equipment in that school serve the occupants? You know, how old is that? Do we think it has 2 years left? Do we think it has 1 year left? You know, what are the ventilation, you know, what is the ventilation that it's bringing in right now? Does it have a dehumidification feature? Or if it doesn't, then in the summer months when we need to bring some fresh outside air, but we're bringing in, you know, humid air, we're going to introduce a lot of mold into our infrastructure. So how do we combat that? So those are things that they look at.
I think the one thing with age that you're looking at is failure. I think you touched on that, Kathy, because I think we have some new systems that we put in that we replaced like with like, and we may not hit the air quality and the ventilation, you know, and or even the thermal comfort, but the system would be new. But it's a question to me, you know, if a system is, the useful life of a system is 2 years and we anticipate we're going to have major failures in the system in 2 years, then we won't have any of the things on below. But I agree. I understand, you know, the comments that have been made. I don't know the answer to that because it's just a complex, it's a very complex item that's narrowed down to four items. And I don't know how we rectify that because of you know, but like I said, if a system fails or we anticipate that we either have to replace it now or we're going to have a, you know, building that we're going to have to shut down, you know, because it fail.
So maybe as a maybe what the age item is an information item, right? Maybe age is on there only for the fact is for information when these decisions they're going to be made. And air quality, ventilation, and thermal comfort are given some sort of percentage, right? Like, do we split the percentage? Do we say that, you know, of the total HVAC points, you know, air quality gets 40%, ventilation gets 40%, thermal comfort gets 20%, and age is there as an information item, so that when we're going through all of these, that might be the thing that switches it over. Like, oh well, this system in itself is 2 years old, but it doesn't meet any of our new standards because of the like for like, right? It was replaced.
Maybe if it's not, I mean, information though, I don't think is exactly what we want either, but maybe it's like a factor, and when I say that, I mean like a multiplication factor. So if you measure these other things, and if it's 0 to 10 years old, those measurables are at their baseline, you know. But if you have these other things, and then the equipment's, you know, 10 to, you guys decide what the numbers are, but 10 to 15 years old, then all of those numbers get doubled, and it suddenly, those other air quality, ventilation, and thermal comfort move into almost, you know, they're even more important because the equipment's also old. And then that way, if there's a 30-year, for some reason, that's just throwing out numbers because I'm not a mechanical engineer, but if there's some equipment that's been out there for 30 years and, you know, and that maybe gets like a ridiculously high multiplication factor, but it all, you know, it gives you great air quality, it gives you great ventilation, it somehow is doing all these things it's supposed to do, but it's 30 years old, and that automatically will also push it into the threshold that could also alone be, you know, a good reason that the HVAC needs to be replaced. But that way, I don't know. But that way, if it's brand new equipment and it's not meeting the air quality requirements, then it has to really not be meeting the air quality requirements or, you know, ventilation, thermal comfort. If it's brand new equipment, it has to be totally failing for that to sort of trigger this category being important, you know.
Yeah,
I think that's a good approach, actually. So,
yeah, I do. I think that is a good approach. I mean, we could break it down. I'm just saying, like, you're just spitballing, you know, 30 years a multiplication factor of 3, 22, who knows how we come up with it, but it would have to be something greater than 1 so that it wouldn't be, you know, you would be able to catch you'd be able to catch the ones that aren't meeting, that would be able to kick it over into a point that would be impactful, right? So I guess what we'll have to do is we'll have to think about that one, and then when for those we can just leave them in as percentages. We can share it out with the group, and then the group can go ahead and provide, let's say, the input saying, like, you know, for instance, maybe, you know, Nathan feels like, oh, well, yeah, air quality and ventilation should have a higher percentage, you know, thermal comfort should have a lower percentage, whatever that may be, and then I think that would probably be a fair way to value the HVAC, you know, category.
You know, we could use the, you know, that method that you sometimes use at charrettes, where you give everybody 5 stickers, and they have to decide how they're going to use their stickers to help prioritize these things. So,
Yeah.
Something like that. Or like you have $100. How would you spend that $100? I wonder if that would help us get to the relative importance of all these different things.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, you know, for these 3 particularly, right? How valuing them and allowing the you know, the members to be, you know, each item you're given whatever the points is. You have given 100 points, you know, allocate them as you see fit.
Would we want to explain, like, when we say air quality, we're talking about what CO2 level, things like that? Like, we couldn't really just leave it, or could we leave it just, we'll figure out the technical criteria later.
I think it'd be helpful to kind of define what that is, only, you know, like in parentheses, like what Kathy was just earlier saying, like it's humidity level, it's this, it's that, you know, thermal comfort. Again, whatever that means to APS in terms of when they go to evaluate it, just so that everybody's on the same page. Ventilation seems like that would include CO2 and air changes.
Notice, thinking about thermal comfort is, although temperature and humidity is important, are we looking for maybe consistency around your entire facility too? Because, like, as we were saying, like, if it's really hot in some parts of the building and really cold in other parts of the building, like that obviously is an indicator that there's a problem of some sorts.
yes, I think that's a really good point. So yes, I think what thermal comfort refers to is kind of the entire building, looking at it holistically. You know, does the building provide adequate or very good thermal comfort, you know, for students and staff? And not have, like you said, a wing or maybe the cafeteria that's always freezing, because then that indicates that there's something wrong. So
yeah.
Well, that can be a function of the building itself too. A stairwell that's 4 stories high that's all glassed in gets really hot up at the top. We have examples.
Yeah, or poor insulation makes for really cold spaces.
right, yeah.
All right, so I think this is good, right? We'll be able to provide some additional information for each one of these items under the categories, and then, you know, give the information, share the information out. But let's keep going through, you know, each of these categories to make sure that we're, you know, whether or not we keep them, we change them, additional items added, whatever. So, electrical. That was, so for these, I mean, some of them, obviously, as mentioned earlier in our conversations, they don't necessarily, they don't validate a high score, right? Like the generator. Like, yes, it would be nice to have a generator that is of, a certain kilowatt, and, I'm not sure if we're even going to look at fuel source for generators. But, hold on. Kathy, you got a question?
So for the electrical, the switchgear, I know we talked about age, but what's also important when we look at or analyze these schools is the capacity. So when we talk about capacity in the electrical sense is, are all their panels at capacity that we can't add, more breakers to it if they have to have another art room for a kiln, things like that. That's kind of what our electricians look at. There are definitely certain schools that they know that, they're at their point. And if that's the case, do we then not only, if we have to look at our switchgear upgrading it, do we have to also upgrade our service from the electrical provider, which would be Dominion? Because sometimes that has to be considered too. I know Jeff's team considers that when we do any major renovation. So, and those, I think, for electrical are really the important things, is if we have adequate service going to the school with the appropriate switchgear and panels, then, then we have capacity to provide their needs, whatever their electrical needs are.
All right. Yeah. So I think, like we said earlier, like being able to provide some of that definitions, so anyone that might pick up this document might have a better understanding of what these items under these categories are. I think that would be helpful. And as to potentially, how they were provide definitions and let's say, not to use this again, but why they were selected.
Yeah, I feel like there's almost, there's almost like categories, like the, what you just described, Kathy, regarding the switchgear capacity is like a flexibility thing. The ability to kind of grow easily or be able to change things around easily within the, an existing building. Or the HVAC age is something that affects like the continuity of service, and keeping schools open, things like that. So it's almost like there's these kind of like hidden categories about why each of these is chosen, and they kind of impact those things. And it's not just like, electrical, but it is. I wouldn't break it out differently, but the more I look at them, I'm thinking of these other, like, why are these important? It's like that's these kind of other things, these other reasons.
Yeah, I agree. So do we still follow through with the same sort of exercise that David described, as we go through this, where, each of the subcommittee members, are given a certain allotment of points per item, like for HVAC, for electrical, right? And then they just divvy it up as they see fit, based on the the why and what, right? Like what they are and why they're on here. And if that's the case, some of these won't fit very neatly into that. Like, in other words, photovoltaic, right? You either have it or you don't. So, how, if that's going to be a percentage, right? Like, so each of these, 5, 6, and 7 under electrical, let's say that, we do the same thing we said before, and they're giving them as a percentage, and, however they break it down. does photovoltaic still get a percentage of the points, but the percentage of the points might be only 10, as you know, compared to, well, let's say the others get 30, an even split. You know, would that be appropriate?
And is that even a good, I guess, characteristic under electrical to have? I mean, is that important in terms of this long-term renovation?
Right. Like I feel like some of those things are maybe important, but only if it's like the deciding factor between otherwise this versus this. You know, these two schools are equal everywhere else, but then suddenly one doesn't have photovoltaics and one does, then maybe you're like, okay, well, we'll do this project instead. You know, we'll do the one without photovoltaics, and then we'll go ahead and add the photovoltaics at the same time and make it more, you know, a more efficient overall project. But I mean, you know, using photovoltaics as an example there, that's a little weird, whereas that might come into play on other things, other items.
Right. Yeah, because I think our approach, or at least it has been when John was here too, is our intent is always to continue to add photovoltaics when we can. And like you said, Rosa, when we look at kind of what's coming down the line for roofing upgrades, you know, when we have to do our roofing bonds and re-roof and things like that, that's where we see opportunity, and that's where we try to dovetail the two projects together. But I don't know if it helps inform, you know, kind of this long-term renovation. I don't know. It could, like you said. So.
Yeah, and I don't know. I like what I mentioned is probably more important on other things. I don't know that that would ever become the deciding factor between two projects, but so maybe it isn't important. I don't feel like that's going to be the driving factor, because the roof system, because you're not going to, you're going to do it if the roof needs to be replaced too, you know. So like if you have a project and you do a full renovation on the inside, but the roof doesn't need to be replaced, then you're not going to do photovoltaics necessarily at that same time. I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly how you guys always make the choices.
And I think it would also be, you know, site specific, right? Like I don't know. I don't think every facility we have is an ideal location for photovoltaic.
Right.
I could be wrong on that, but I imagine there's certain roofs with equipment that sort of the amount that you would get from, you know, the array would be, you know, is it worth it? In other words.
Right. When we evaluate our roofing system, when we first started, is like Michael said, first of all, is age of the roof, you know, is it ready to get replaced or, you know, resealed? And then the structural integrity. So if it's an older school, it might not have the load bearing capacity as a newer school might have. So then we have to do that analysis. And then the final thing is, how open is that roof? Do we have too much of mechanical equipment on it? Most of our secondary schools are great opportunities because there's not a lot of canopy, but some of them have too much mechanical equipment. And so that's kind of how we, you know, go through the process. And that's how like W&L and Kenmore kind of bubbled up to be very good candidates. So.
All right, so perhaps we remove this, and this is something that just continues on as a regular project on its own, right? I mean,
I think it can be, because it's really the ability to be solar ready. You know, I mean, I don't think it's a deciding factor on whether a building is renovated or not. It's, you know, do you have too much shading from the surrounding trees? Do you know, there's all kinds of reasons.
so of the other three, those are pretty solid. I mean, we haven't really touched on the indoor lighting LED percentage. I mean, I'm not as familiar with what facilities have in regards to that. Or, you know, do we have facilities that don't have complete LED?
Yes,
We do. So
Oh.
we've done LEDs when we can upgrade. So especially in larger spaces like gymnasiums and things like that. And like as Jeff does kind of the interior renovations of some of the schools, they've gone and done an LED upgrade. So I think that is still something good to put in, but I don't want to, so I understand what Rosa was saying with the photovoltaic system. And so I don't want to forget about it, because I think Rosa makes a good point, is that as we go through this process of long-term renovation and prioritize these schools, there is an opportunity. Like if we're going to do a major renovation, we're doing a roofing and HVAC and things like that, and we have the opportunity to say, oh, if we're going to redo the roof and HVAC, you know, there might be an opportunity for this school then to put solar. It's just, we need to have that as a consideration, but not as a driving factor, I guess.
correct.
Well, I mean, but then would that play into it's not a value to it. It's part of the renovation process itself. So
Yes, you're right. That's correct.
could that then be, like it would be provided in sort of the, like the summary of it, right? And it's mentioned, but it's not a
Driving factor.
right. Maybe
Right.
Maybe.
And certainly if it was a driving factor, it would go back to what Jeff said about it's the opportunity for maximizing photovoltaics. It's not whether they have it. It's not a yes or no.
maybe we add it as part of the description of the renovation process. And I'm sure there'll be, I'm sure there might be some other ones that also fall under that category. Right. Okay, let's take notes. All right. So again, these three they'll be assigned some sort of, percentage. Let's add that in here. Okay.
So I'm probably being silly, but electrical and HVAC are often really closely related too. How do you tease those apart? Speaking as someone who's happy to still have electricity, if not gas heat.
Can you ask that question again, Lois?
Yeah, no, we've separated HVAC and electrical. And, electrical is a big component of HVAC too.
No,
Even-
it is. It definitely is, but they are also separate entities, because we could have enough capacity at a school, but the HVAC equipment, has some challenges, whether it's in ventilation, the age of its central plant, or, the classroom equipment and things like that. And then vice versa, we could, have been upgrading the HVAC at certain schools, but then we've run into a capacity issue, right?
Okay.
Like you said. So that's how we kind of separate the two trades areas.
Okay, that works. Thank you.
All right. Plumbing. So with the plumbing, we've gone over this a couple of times now, and I'm not sure how we would be able to measure some of these, like drainage. Like we know that there might be some issues with floor drains not being in the locations that they're needed. I believe in like cafeterias, in kitchens. And I'm not sure of what if they should have that overwhelming of a value, or is that something that sort of comes out of it's just part of the renovation process itself? Like, in other words, should they have a weight that quantifies them, or is there other weights for some of these other items that really need to be included, and perhaps drainage isn't, because that will be addressed if that school is sort of bubbles to the top.
I think the one thing with drainage probably that would throw something into, needing done or being an issue would be where we have significant clogs, where the piping is not sufficient in size, corroding pipes, and those kinds of things that would throw us in. And I don't know how we, quote, quantify that other than, the issues. I mean, some schools are dependent upon grinder pumps that don't work. We end up with backups, and we have, first floors that, all of a sudden we can't use it because we have a drainage issue, whether it's, from a, inadequate pipe sizing, clogs, corroded pipes, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there are times where drainage would say that it has affected, the occupancy of the school. And I think that would be the only thing I could think of from drainage. Otherwise, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind.
But it would have to be kind of a persistent problem, right, Jeff?
That's
something that cannot be repaired.
Correct.
Or something. Okay.
Yeah, like it's under the floor. It's an inherent problem. Or we put 6 additions on this building, and we're still running it through a 3-inch, sewer line from 1930. Instead of what should be a 4 or 6-inch pipe, and the only way to fix that is to dig it all up or replace it, and that requires a major change. But that happens. But I don't know. I haven't been involved in maintenance's issues with regard to piping. I mean, pipe has, if you have a cast iron pipe or an iron pipe, it does have a life span. That it does have to eventually have something done to it if you have a really old building.
Jeff, I was just thinking, as we to tie this all back to the adequacy question and what impact any of this stuff has on the usability of the school. Is there a way of checking logs for when, like, plumbing related issues have disrupted school for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think we have work orders. Yeah, like a systemic drainage issue.
Yeah,
that's what Kathy kind of said.
Yeah, we had a systemic drainage issue at Campbell. I mean, we had to redo a sewer line, basically in the front where the school fronts Carlin Springs. So yes, definitely we have that kind of information.
Yeah, so that would probably be a good measurable.
Would the pressure and flow problems at Wakefield be an example of something that is intermittent or chronic, or I hear in the family about reports when they can't use the bathrooms on certain floors and things like that.
I think that's systemic. It's just the nature of where we connected to the county's water. So
we had the same issue at Fleet.
Yeah. So is that something that would bump up any profile of priority? I guess I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't be. Frankly, it seems like it's not always a problem, and we're muddling along at Wakefield. But I mean, if there were other things, this could be. I don't know if it's a multiplier or just additive, but it certainly counts, I think, and I don't think anybody's saying it doesn't. But I guess with flow and pressure or drainage, the issue is whether it's chronic.
Correct.
Right, and I think not just interrupts instruction, but there might be some ridiculously excessive maintenance, program that you have related to it too. I mean, so I think either of those, excessive maintenance and repairs versus actually causing failures, causing the school to close. in my mind, they're on par for something like drainage.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Thank you.
Right, and drainage is more than just sewage. It has to be storm too that we have to consider. So-
Yeah.
Yeah, for instance, the Ed Center had iron pipes, and we lost our chiller just before we closed that building because it shattered, and the rainwater filled up the mechanical room where the chiller was. So I mean, there are issues, and stormwater does have a life as well. Where your roof drains go down through the building. So.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
so
good
to me, this is a yes or a no, in that it either has a problem or it doesn't. And if it has a problem, then that kicks in some points. And if it doesn't, then it gets nothing. It's not like a scale,
Yep.
And then what are the isolation valves do?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
So that's actually one of our plumbing team's biggest asks every time a new school is built, is that anytime they need to troubleshoot, if there are no isolation valves in the school, they need to shut the whole school down. Because if they need to shut the water down, but if you have isolation valves throughout your school, you could shut down a wing or a section to see, figure out what the issue is. And some of our older schools lack that ability. So like you said, it then impacts kind of school operations.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you have a fixture in your house that has to be replaced and you don't have a shut-off valve on it. You have to shut down the entire water system when you have a problem.
Okay.
So that's really what the isolation valves are, and I think that is a critical thing in a school today, because if you could just shut the isolation valve to that toilet room and put a do not use on it, that's one thing. But when you got to shut down the entire wing and nobody has any water in any facility, it's really hard to help school. So I think that is a critical.
Also, related to plumbing. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm realizing the term plumbing is not expansive. It's like plumbing, and it's water supply and drainage together.
Yeah.
'Cause like you said, there's storm systems, and that's not. Is that
Right.
also considered plumbing, or is that?
It is when it's in the building. Yes. Like if you have a drain that goes through the building, it's considered plumbing.
Considered plumbing. Oh, okay. How about fixture efficiency? I'm thinking of low flow, and we're trying to manage water usage on the front end. Can we quantify that?
I mean, we can try. I don't know how. I mean, I think we know where the schools that do not probably have low flow fixtures compared to the ones that do. But in terms of quantifying it, are you saying say 50% of the fixtures have low flow in that
No,
school? Is that what you're asking?
What I was just thinking might be better, rather than doing that. Can we just do a water usage per square foot or water usage per
student? We
student?
definitely can provide that. Yes.
Yeah, because then we'll know which ones are running higher, which ones are running lower.
The caution I would put, and we actually have data on our website through 2019 for water usage, is the schools with central plants that have chilled water systems with cooling towers. That will throw off your water usage data tremendously.
Yeah, that's true, because you can't separate them.
No, unfortunately, we haven't been able to separately meter those, and those are large water usage.
Oh yeah, that's huge. So what would we do?
I guess you could note that. I mean, just give the perspective to the number, right? But even just something as simple as whether you have, dual flush toilets. I mean, just if you have that type of fixture in the school that tends to conserve use of water.
Yeah, that and the sinks that automatically turn off and that kind of annoying stuff that nobody really likes. But are those, I mean, they're the most visible water saving devices, but do they represent the most significant water usage in the buildings? You know, like aside from the chillers, like would there be
Right.
other uses that are much bigger?
So the
than that?
toilets are the most water intensive devices besides our central plant equipment.
Okay.
So,
So
you
that is
know,
relevant.
so if we feel like we've had a blip in water usage, we normally ask the plumbers to check the toilets first for any kind of leaks. The schools that have showers, and then they kind of work their way down from there. Many times a school has a cooling tower, that's the first thing we ask them to go check. So
What about
Okay.
the swimming pools?
they can use water, but you'd be surprised, not to the level of a cooling tower.
Whoa, really?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, because the whole point is for it to
Yeah, to
go-
evaporate, and when you have a
evaporate to cool the
faulty
building.
cooling
Yeah.
tower, you're dumping loads of water. So
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Good education.
So water usage, we're not really sure if we're going to include it or not. I'll leave it in here as a question mark. So we'll
but it's a
add
good
it.
point to look at, like water efficient, I don't want to say appliances, but like toilets and sinks and things like
Fixtures.
that. Fixtures, thank you.
Fixtures.
I guess that would be percent covered. So those two, the isolation valves and that water usage efficient fixtures, would be sort of a percent cover, I guess. And then the other two would just be like Rosa said, you know, yes or no. And then, you know, if it is a yes, then it's given some sort of point. So then these again, these two on the end would be some sort of percentage. And then these other ones would just have a value. And then I guess what we could do is we could ask staff what the value would be. I think that would probably be a good compromise there. Ask the plumbing staff.
Yeah. Do we
Yeah.
want to separate actual water usage from the number of the fixtures? I mean, they both feed into the same information, but they're two different ways of measuring. I think they're both valuable because they tell different parts of the story.
They do. I'm just concerned with including water usage. I'm not saying that it's not a something that's quantitative. I just think that it might be something that would be hard to compare one to another. You know, like it's
Right.
it would be, you know, Wakefield, as you know, at one point had a lovely water, had a cooling tower that was, you know, dumping a ton of water, right, until the geothermal was fixed. So, you know, that skewed it until it was, you know, the system was able to come back online. And if we're adding a percentage or a value to water usage, I'm not sure if we look at it, that would be appropriate. Like it might.
Yeah, I guess if we can't, if we can't separate out the evaporative cooling systems, then you're right. That's messy.
Yeah, they're not.
Unless
They're
we
not.
compare the apples to the apples and the oranges to the oranges, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, they're not metered, right, Kathy? Yeah.
No.
So I mean, that would be.
No, they're not separately metered. I mean, I can
No.
tell you right off, and when we have an issue with that, that's where we go. Number one.
But we could compare all the facilities that have evaporative cooling systems to each other, and then come up with a high, medium, low, and then we could compare separately the schools that don't have those kinds of systems and compare them against each other to get an idea on which ones are using more relative to the other ones in the same category.
Yeah, I just feel like
Is that too
I
much
feel
in the
like
weeds?
it should, yeah, I think so. I mean, only because I feel like if you have the water efficient fixtures and maybe, you know, maybe you tie that in with a couple other things that you know are save water, then I think that would kick in some amount of points to help you to do something in that for that project instead of the other one. But I don't feel like, you know, I don't know. I don't think that the water usage as a whole, if you can't define it or compare it, and I don't think I think it would be getting too difficult to do that. Whereas water efficient fixtures, if you have them, then hopefully your water usage is down already because you're using these water efficient fixtures. And then if you don't have them, then you know that that will kick into also, you know, that when we upgrade this building, we're going to, you know, use less water. We're going to save some, you know, money on that as well. So I don't know. It just seems like the water efficient fixtures is an easier way to measure, to quickly quantify whether or not a project is efficient in terms of its water usage, even though it's not 100% accurate.
So we'll add water usage to the, you know, the description of the renovation process, the cooling towers specifically. What's up, Nathan? You got a question?
Yeah. Do you guys track like work orders by trade? So just over a 12-month period, how many times you have to send the plumbing guys to a particular school?
We do track our, oh, sorry. We track our work orders by trade. I can tell you sometimes they don't inform as well as they should, because sometimes the work orders that come from schools may not be descriptive enough of the problem or maybe duplicate. So yes, we do it. And I think the plumbing team would know, which ones are more problematic, but I don't know how much information that would give this group.
I'm just wondering, just an absolute number.
You mean how many numbers of work orders by trade? Yeah. Oh yeah, we do have that.
Okay. So, I mean, isn't that a proxy for how much maintenance a system needs?
Like I said, it's a little iffy because sometimes a work order would say, like, my room is too hot, too cold. It's not descriptive enough. And if you go, it could be a major issue, or it could be, oh, they had set the lever down and, they just have to reset it. So it doesn't inform as well as we'd like it to.
But how about for plumbing? I mean, we're here talking, it's kind of a thing, like, it's behind the walls. You can't really figure it out except when you have problems, right? So if something needs to be addressed, it probably has a lot of problems that you have to go address, right?
Yeah, I think that will help us, like the ones that really bubble up, like you said, like consistently.
Yeah.
Yes, that will help us. It does definitely inform. Yes.
Right.
It also should be fairly easy to gather that data.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we can definitely run by school, like by trade, by school, and then just to see, if say, the courtyard drains keep coming up, or, this section of the bathroom at that school keeps coming up. Yeah, that should definitely help inform us.
Well, I don't think you would even want to get that specific. I was just going to say the number of work orders per school.
That might not be as informative to you.
Yeah. I think, I looked at work orders, I don't know, years ago, on that, and it's interesting. You have some schools that are work orders will go through an individual that works at that school, the building manager that sort of handles all that information and is appropriately filing the work orders. Whereas some other schools might have work orders that are just placed consistently for an issue that Kathy addressed that might be something that is easily fixed, but could be constantly getting a work order. People can put in multiple ones. There's not really a restriction on it. And the data itself, if we look at it that way, just as the whole school, I feel as though it can be a bit misleading. That's my opinion of it. So, I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, that was my initial gut for all this years ago, Nathan. And when I got the data and started going through it, I was a bit overwhelmed with what was actually provided. I think we need a new, I think one thing that we can come out of this is that we might need a new work order system. I think that would be extremely helpful. Jim's not on here to combat my argument for that, but yeah, I think that would be something that should be addressed. Okay, moving along. We haven't even got past the first one yet, which is fine. But we're on to sort of the fire suppression, fire, I know that Nathan put in fire escape in there. I'm not really sure. That's a bit out of my depth when it comes to that. So I'm not really sure what that might mean. Fire
So one
escape.
example might be, because I think we talked about it today, because we were talking about that bad fire in New York, is fire doors, right? Older buildings don't have fire doors that are now required, by code to have to prevent fire from spreading too rapidly. So do we have that situation at our schools? I mean, Jeff would probably be the best to inform us of that. Is that a good way to analyze for long-term renovation?
Yeah, I think that we probably should have fully sprinklered or not fully sprinklered, which would be a yes or no. And as far as smoke doors, fire doors, the way if you do a fully sprinklered building, and I think it would be fully sprinkler meeting current code would include all of those things, Kathy, probably, because an old fire door doesn't do what a new fire door. However, at the Heights, we've got all of this smoke separation, and it's a complicated system. And could one of those doors fail at one time? Yes. The one thing that we have to remember with schools too, that you don't have people sleeping in schools. Yeah, sure, there's some kids that sleep in class, but somebody's going to wake them up and drag them out if there's a fire. But schools are the only buildings that people practice evacuating. And what's the longest it takes to empty one of our schools? It's minutes, if that. But I don't know that, you get into the fire escape thing. I think you open up a can of worms with regard to the disability community and the fire department. And, just like with Fleet meets all current codes and standards, and we have places for kids to shelter in place. But if a parent doesn't want a child to shelter in place, then you've got the issue of how do you get them out, and especially now that we're doing 4-story schools. So I don't know that I think we should be looking at it in that way. And I think the other thing is the fire alarm meeting current codes and standards would be another thing, because we're finding that a lot of buildings that we're doing work in, we end up having to replace the fire alarm systems. The other thing that most people don't know is most of your devices that are on a fire alarm, your strobe lights, your horns, and all of that stuff, they need to be replaced like every 12 years. So I think that that's really what we should be looking at with regard to fire. I don't know that I put in fire escape, because I think there's, we do have egress and exiting. And it has to meet the current codes and standards, I think, is really what we should be looking at,
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. I feel like, the fire alarm, not just the panel, but the whole system should be on there, like you just typed in sprinkler. And then I think I agree with the sprinkler. I mean, in a lot of fires, the sprinkler, having a sprinkler system, regardless of everything else complying with code, even, is the one of the best ways to not have a fire, to not have it spread and cause smoke and have other things. So time and time again, that I feel like is a really good thing. I don't know how you guys deal with tampering of sprinkler systems or those kinds of things, but for egressing, I feel like if you're meeting the current codes, and you can pick that date, like today or whatever, then that I think is key. So if you've got a 70-year-old building that met the code at the time, but doesn't meet current codes, I think that that's where you might be concerned, you know, because I know that a lot of the projects that I've helped work on for like for the federal government downtown, they have all these wonderful historic buildings that don't have the proper egressing. And it's like,
Yeah.
I get that you want to keep this beautiful historic building, but come on, at what point is life safety more important than historic preservation? I think so. I think the meeting the current codes is key. And then I think in those current codes, it does say, if you're meeting this, this, and this as an existing builder, you're grandfathered in. But I don't feel like I don't think you should allow for yourself to accept that grandfathering in. I think, you should make sure you're trying to meet the current codes as they stand now. Handrail heights, things like that,
Yeah.
Definitely number of egresses and types of egress, etc. But I don't feel it belongs here under fire suppression, and I would change fire escape to fire alarm.
And then will these be it's going to be like a panel, an alarm, and the system, we have age in there. It has to have some sort of valuation to it, though. So are we going to then place the discretion of that point on staff in order to, like, in other words, if the system's 15 years old, it gets this amount of points. If the system's 5 years old, it gets less amounts of points.
I think we have to count on staff for that because they're the ones who maintain and operate these systems. I've walked into buildings thinking we have an old system and it was replaced 3 years ago and it's absolutely fine. So I think that the value range has to be provided by staff. I think the other thing that we could look at and add to this one would just be egress meeting current codes and standards.
But I'd stick it under the code standard 1 year number 17.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. Okay. Sorry. Yep. I think that'd be good.
Do you want egress down here?
Yeah, I would put egress down there. Yep.
All right. Spoiler, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Sorry.
So the structure.
That was Rose's fault, not mine.
We mentioned this before about like the roof and the windows. That's pretty straightforward. And again, I think that's going to be some sort of value range that's going to be provided by staff, based on, their, how many times they have to go out there to fix the roof because it's X amount of, years old, right? How many patches they have to do, how many maintenance they have to do on that stuff. And I would say with the windows as well.
So I don't want to throw a monkey wrench into this, Michael, but sometimes our roofs, while they're old, are actually really good roofs, though, if they were installed properly, whereas we might have mid-range roofs that are leaky. So some of our biggest issues are leaks in roofs rather than age. I mean, age is definitely a huge thing because you have to, replace it based on the age, but also leaks are a bigger issue for our roofs. And that's harder to quantify. I mean, I think what Nathan had asked about work orders, I think that's something we would have to draw from as well. And I know that they do keep track of that.
So, yeah, I think it's good when we're describing this, and like we stated earlier in it, we're going to have to give descriptors for each of these items so that, it's very clear when we say roof, when we give it a value, how that value was quantified, right? The value was based on the age, based on the number of leaks, because of, whatever it might be, work orders or, go ahead, Rosa.
Yeah, sorry. So would you want to have these as two separate items? So that you can kind of quantify those two things, differently, and like a leaky roof, regardless of age. And then age, if you were measuring age, maybe it's, age of that specific roof type, so if you're expecting it to be a 30-year roof and it's at 30 years, then okay, then it's already at its, expected useful life end, versus if you're expecting a 15-year roof and you're at 15, then that would also be at the full end of useful life,
I think you could say
Age
useful life rather than age, Michael. Because depends on the roof.
Not to throw another monkey wrench in here, but we have multiple roofs on our buildings as well. So it's
Oh, right.
so you can have 4 different types of roof on one building. Glebe comes to mind.
Glebe has 25, I think.
Oh, 25. Lovely.
More than, let's say more than 10.
Kathy, do you think something that under roof should be insulation as well? Because that's where most of our heat loss is, and
I think that's going to be hard for
I know it's going to be
our
hard.
team to identify. So I think roof by useful life, but I think Rose is right. We should probably have like a 14, 15, 16, Michael, and then roof by leaks, and then windows. So like 3 sub, because I don't know how you would do insulation. I mean,
Yeah.
I think David would know. I mean,
Yeah.
our roof supervisor, but
Well,
that would be
that's what I was going to say. I mean, I feel like a lot of these things we can try to define, but the people who are in the schools working on them, I mean, if you ask someone who's working in 5 different schools, do any of them have any issues here? They can tell you off the top of their head. I mean,
Oh yeah, they definitely will.
So all
But then
we have
again,
to do,
if you have a 50-year-old coal tar build-up roof that's self-healing, and it's got another 50 years of its life, do you really want to rip it up to put extra insulation under it? Probably not.
No, but I was just going to say, all we really have to do is provide the opportunity for the people who work on these buildings to tell us what's going
Right.
on, if that makes sense. I mean, it's like the guy who worked at Randolph when all the AC units were on the roof and they kept leaking down through the roof, but you couldn't change the roof until you worked on the AC, and that had impacts on the windows and everything too. I mean, I think with this kind of a setup, we're basically laying we're opening the door for him to be able to explain what's going on. And I'm using him, maybe it's a she, but if that makes any sense, I don't think we have to define exhaustively, but we have to provide the opportunity to address these things. Am I saying that right?
Right. The opportunity to put a ranking on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I think that's fine. And the question I have on windows, are we looking at insulating, glass, or are we looking at leaky windows? Are we looking at obscure glass you can't see out of? Are we looking at it to be non-tempered or tempered or laminated safety? I mean, I don't know what we're looking at for windows. We don't, is it an educational thing that, you want to have view and, ability to open? I don't know what the question is on the windows. That's a question that I had when I saw that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a loaded one. When I talked to David Stash about this, he went down the rabbit hole, like you were just describing with the windows. And perhaps that's one reason why windows typically don't get replaced, is because of what's the true, what are we trying to achieve by replacing windows, right?
Right. I mean, the biggest
Thermal
problem with
efficiency
windows
is one, right?
is security, and they don't close, and you have wind and snow blowing through them. I mean, if you have a window that actually closes, the difference between an insulated glass window and a properly operating single pane window, isn't that huge. You still lose a lot of heat through it. But if you have wind and snow and rain blowing through it, then it's an issue you should address. But I don't know how we, is it exterior envelope?
Well,
and if you have leaky windows, does just maintenance fix it? Or, I mean, or does it really need like completely new windows? Or, I don't know. I mean, can you seal stuff? I don't know, but I guess I think it belongs on the list. I just don't know how you evaluate it.
So maybe
I think the windows comes in a couple of places. It comes in air quality, because if you can open the window, you can improve your air quality. It also comes in light, natural light, for kids, in the classroom. I mean, there are other ways of getting light, but windows is the obvious one. So their presence is acknowledged, their openability may be acknowledged in the comfort measures.
I don't want to break whatever Michael might have hidden further down on the list, but do we list the windows for ventilation and view under the educational benefits?
So that would be something that would most likely be built into that. So in other words, Jeff, when you're, doing your classroom sort of
Evaluation.
Educational specifications, that would be something that would, does this meet the current standard of, right, operable?
Right.
I would imagine that would be in there, or
minimum, and
daylighting.
Yeah, I feel like this isn't a measure of that because we're under what the building systems heading or whatever. To me, this is all about, energy efficiency, cost of continuity of service.
Yeah, and I guess my thing is it more than windows? Is it the exterior envelope? Is it the drive-it that's, bird pecked and full of mold, or is it, brick with control joints that just need to be resealed? I think it's almost, you almost want to look at just the exterior envelope and include windows in that.
Yeah, right. So envelope and fenestration and group them.
Yeah, we could do that.
Fenestration, I like that word.
Mhm.
That sounds like it could be to me.
It's a good word.
But I think that's, when I look at our existing buildings and I look at a solid masonry building that really has stood the test of time, is not spalling, and everything is in good shape other than the control joints that probably haven't been maintained for years. I would rather keep that building than the one that's from 1973 that was built with, really bad insulation, really bad framing. When we pull the old skin off of it, we find that all the studs are rusted, and we're lucky that we don't have walls blowing down. So I mean, I've done schools for way too long, and you can look at an exterior of a building and understand what your envelope issues are, and I think that that's what we have to look at, but I don't know how we quantify it.
Remember aluminum wiring, Jeff?
Aluminum what?
Aluminum wiring, remember?
Oh, yeah.
That was a big 70s thing.
Well, we still do aluminum wiring.
We do?
Yeah, I have aluminum wiring in my place.
No, just the main lead. No, not within the building, but the main conductor, we sometimes do aluminum and aluminum bars to save money. But yeah, you don't want individual wires. That's where you have fires.
Mm-hmm.
Should we add then envelope to this item to 15 is both, the solid envelope and the windows, or do we add it as a separate item still, as like a number 16 or something that, windows stays windows and envelope stays envelope, but it gets added? I feel like you have to figure out a way to judge it, but maybe it's just a random scale. It's not measurable data that says this is this and this is this, but you can assess your buildings and go, this envelope stinks and this one is good, and these windows suck.
Would it be like a durable envelope, yes or no? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
All right, that's good. So security vestibules, whether they have it or they don't, I guess. Right, that's an easy one. We already talked about codes and standards, whether they meet them.
Sorry, Michael, don't some schools have, some of them are upgraded to the new vestibules and some are not?
Yeah, we have some facilities that do not have the what the standard airlock, if you want to call it.
Yep.
So Jeff's office is currently going through. You see those periodically come up at the school board when they have to address that. That was part of what I think he described as Jefferson when we were there just last night.
Yeah, I think that the security vestibule, probably by the time we get to this, we're going to have most of the schools either done or in place. However, we still will not have a security vestibule at Thomas Jefferson because so it would be valuable to be on here because I think that should be considered when we look at that facility, down the road, so.
Mhm.
But I think security vestibule, yes or no, is the appropriate response.
Okay. Everyone's good with the code and standards?
Yep.
I feel like maybe it should, I mean, I like these as just their individual things, but I almost feel like there should be maybe a breakdown of the code so that, okay, so egress is one of the things, life safety, egress, energy code, and each of those might have a slightly different weight. ADA, accessibility, things like that. Whereas meet current code, like you could meet everything except for the most, I don't know. So I don't know if that's important though to break down more or not, but
Mm.
I think it is. Because then if you're comparing two schools, if the answer is no, they don't meet current code, well, how far off are you? Is it like we have to fix a fire stairwell, or is it like 16 different things we have to fix? You'd want to prioritize the one we have to fix more. So I think it's worth breaking it down
So,
to something manageable, not like 4,900 different types.
so perhaps what we do is that's part of the definition, right? These are the items that were used to address whether or not they meet the current code or whether or not they meet the code at time built.
yeah. But I feel like you still might want to put a value on each of those individual things, because to me, the life safety and egress is significantly more important than energy. And I mean, I don't know. So I guess, but I think energy should still be tracked, as an item, because it would be nice to know that, okay, this is, this building, again, met energy code at the time, but if we were to do it now, it needs, low E coatings, it needs insulated glazing, it needs all these other things to meet energy code.
Yeah, and the ADA
So I think that's
has
still worth
evolved over
tracking.
time. Yeah, and ADA has evolved over time too, so we
Well,
could
yeah, I mean,
keep
ADA is still a civil rights legislation, and I think that the bottom line is we have to meet. I think the thing is I forget the word now. Reasonable accommodation is the way a lot of our schools have been done, and when we just like we just looked at Swanson, one of the bathrooms, we made modifications for better accessibility for the particular student, and we're going to always have to do that. But I think that you have a better baseline if the building is brought up to the current ADA code. However, we're always trying to exceed that by making it universally accessible. ADA code it's really not a code. It's if somebody feels discriminated against, they can come after you for it. And they tried in the latest iteration. They tried to say if you met the code, you would be, have a safe haven, and that didn't pass. The attorneys didn't want that because they like the way that it currently is. That they can bring suit. But anyhow, I think that we have to look at the buildings that way because there are some buildings that are very difficult, or if not impossible, to meet the current ADA requirements. So I think it's something that should be I think as much as egress, life safety, and ADA, because we can end up with the school system can end up with civil penalties from a punitive standpoint, but from a realistic standpoint, the accessibility for the students is limited if you are not meeting the minimum ADA standards.
Yeah, okay, so I think that's a 4, keeping a breakdown or having a breakdown. It could still
Sure.
kind of be like these subcategories that the total score then informs that current code heading.
Yep.
I don't know if I agree with meets code at time built. I'm not sure if that's something we have to track. I mean, if it didn't meet code at the time it was built, I mean, I don't know, like,
Yeah, I think we
I
really,
hope so.
I think we just should say meets current code with regard to egress, you know, because if it doesn't meet current code, it meets the code at the time it was built. That's what you're saying, correct, Rosa?
Yeah, agreed. I guess the assumption is that if all of our buildings should meet the code in which the time they were built. You know, they should, right? But I mean, obviously, maybe they didn't, but whatever. But we're not tracking that, and we're really only evaluating, improvements to meet the current codes.
Okay. We got less than 5 minutes. We got 2 more to go for tonight, I guess, which is good. So these last 2 were ones that was that Nathan added, and trying to fit them in here. This is sort of what this is sort of what I came up with. And with the relocatables, I think what might be helpful is the presence of relocatables, right? Like, how long the relocatables have been on that site. That might be it's something that would be helpful to this. So we can think of some facilities that have relocatables there for over a decade. So in some iteration, whether or not it was 2 at one time, or whether it was 4, or whether it was 8, still that shows that for whatever reason, that building in itself wasn't meeting the needs of the enrollment, right? However, we need to keep in mind that originally relocatables were used as a tool to address neighborhood enrollment. Relocatables have evolved over the years, and they've also now addressed these option school enrollments. So it could be a little misleading because of the fact that schools have changed their programs. And some schools have had relocatables in order to accommodate construction. So if we look at Abington had a dozen relocatables on site, over a dozen. So, I'm trying to work with how this could be, a measurable item under this category. Any thoughts would be helpful.
I'm not a big fan of this as having any real value. As we saw from last night's presentation, right, we might be looking at pretty flat enrollment for the next decade or so. It would seem to be that, if we're relying on relocatables as a regular part of our facilities, then we're doing something wrong. They're to address sort of immediate problems, right? And so I think we shouldn't plan for relocatables. We should plan for better buildings up front. And I wouldn't really put much value in this.
I feel like it almost takes like it almost would be assigned a negative value so that, like if all of the other projects, if again, 2 projects are equal, other than this, then the building that has the ability to place relocatables on its site waits, and you do the other one first, because if you have an enrollment issue, you can always throw some relocatables out on this one. So let's fix this one to get this one up to speed. But I think with the overall goal of this thing, I don't know that I think I agree that it maybe doesn't impact it. Like it shouldn't be a priority. I don't know. I don't know. What you want to talk more about it, Nathan?
So I think it was.
Actually, can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we've had some hesitancy to do some boundary changes that we know we need to do, like between Abingdon and Drew. So we've got 4 relocatables at Abingdon. And we've got enough capacity, but we have to have relocatables because we don't want to make some hard decisions. And it's a policy. It's more of a policy or a board action than it is a sense about the building and our planning work. It's just, this is where we are.
I would just add to that. I think we all probably have some mixed feelings about relocatables, but I think that in many cases they're sort of neutral. They do carry us through kind of the ebbs and flows. I mean, we're never going to have a perfect match of where people are to buildings without having a lot of extra capacity around. We will at times need relocatables, and that does spare us some pain of new boundaries. So there are trade-offs, but I think that we can look at that and we can say, well, this school's had relocatables for more than 10 years. That's a little bit different judgment. There's also the singleton relocatables and then the pods. So they qualitatively, they feel different too. I know teachers sometimes really love the relocatables. That amazed me when I saw that. I witnessed that because I thought they were awful. But I think we can all have different sort of emotional reactions to relocatables, but they serve a really important purpose at times. Of course, they can be abused or overused or whatever.
So I was looking back, Michael, at the original notes that I sent you. So having relocatables or not having relocatables, or whether they've been there for a long time, that's not really what I was thinking we'd want to measure as part of this. We want to measure just the ability to do it, because if you it was kind of like what Rosa was saying, that if you have the ability to put relocatables on a site, it's inherently more flexible, and so that should weigh into whether you want to do an expansion project. Because it's kind of linked to the second part of it, is the capacity flexibility is really what it is, either temporary or permanent. And so those are the sorts of things that you would want to take into consideration.
So does this kind of go to like you were just alluded to, like a consideration, like perhaps we have these categories, right? And maybe there's an additional that was similar to the first group.
It was also, it's really more of a consideration, because the other thing is it can make doing renovation jobs easier. Like if you have to close down a wing for 6 months while you're doing major renovation work there, if you can put 8 or 10 relocatables on a site or whatever, and put the students in there temporarily, then you don't have to go find them space elsewhere.
Rosa.
Yeah, I almost feel like, okay, so you have categories, and then suddenly on this one, each category is its own number. I feel like the category should be ability to expand, and maybe the ability to place relocatables falls under this as number 19, under the ability to expand. And then 20, feasibility, maybe there's also just a general site study that is like, can we add additions? Do we have room to add additions and still have playgrounds? And, so to me, the feasibility study was the big view, and then maybe relocatables is another line item under ability to expand. I think that relocatables and how many years relocatables have already been on a project site should be on here as well. I actually do think that that's important.
Yeah, I think
but I feel that maybe goes under equity, like you know, because that
Yeah.
becomes an equity issue of these students aren't really part of the school if they're always out in these other classrooms. And it doesn't maybe belong here under building systems.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I like that, putting it under the equity heading. And, we've all heard the stories about the teachers who really prefer the relocatables, but it's like the teachers might like them, but it's not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean it's better for, the whole school or for the students. It's just sort of selfishly, they like to be left alone to do their own thing. And, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not good, but anyway.
Actually, they really try and group them in teams in the quads,
That's true.
and they are like a little community. So
Yeah,
I,
the little
I
quads are
think
good.
it's sort of,
Yeah.
yeah. And I worry because I remember when WNL opened, we had relocatables there the next year, and it was more of a capacity issue and growth and having to change boundaries again.
Maybe that. I mean, we could use the study that shows that it doesn't necessarily have, some are able to be accommodated within the existing common spaces of the building, right? Relocatables are defined either as, being able to be accommodated in the regular day in and day out of the building, whether or not they tip the scales of the, cafeteria and kitchen, and whether or not they just go well beyond that. So I think that would be appropriate if we had that in there as some sort of, I use capacity, quote unquote, though. I mean, it's not like, like ability. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then this one we're going to strike. Okay. So that's good. We made it through one. We have 3 more, so we have more meetings. Yeah, not tonight. Sorry, David. I know you're all eager. Just teasing you, man. I will say this though. So before we go, we just a couple minutes. The last one that we have on here is the equity one. And Kathy and I discussed this in length today. And what we propose is that we consult with our Chief of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Otley, and bring to him what we as staff are struggling with. I'm not sure if the members are, but staff itself, as to how to define equity in the built environment, and sort of have some questions for him that we could allow him to provide APS's viewpoint when it comes to that to the FAC. So we're going to work on some questions around that, and any input that y'all can provide for such questioning. That way he has some time to prepare prior to coming. He can just come to the FAC with the questions, be able to address them, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer any additional ones that come up. But it's always just nice to have an idea of who you're addressing and what you're going to be asked. So we can get more into that discussion later, because that would take up way more time than we just did right now. So what I'll do is I will go ahead and compile this first category that we have, send it out to the group, along with the additional ones that we haven't reviewed yet, and allow you to provide some feedback as to the approach for quantifying all this stuff. Do we have the right approach for some of these? So, and if we miss anything. My cat's going crazy. I'm sorry if he's just driving me crazy. Any last comments or thoughts?
When's the next meeting, Michael?
That's a good question.
Is it next week?
Let's see. Sorry. No, it's not. It is Monday, the 24th. Same time.
Gotcha.
Okay. And I had just one quick question. So common space adequacy is the next one. What is the third group? It was educational space. Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then the last one was these equity considerations. So that's the one where it gets kind of
Harry.
a lot of feelings involved with that one. So that's why that's what I'm saying. I think it's a struggle to quantify, and that's why we would really appreciate any input that could be provided by our chief of DEI. So.
Hey, Michael, just a quick thing on the accessibility. Do we need to do something with the transgender bathrooms? I know they did a lot of work on that a couple of years ago before the pandemic, just making sure every schools were finding those spaces within the existing space, but.
Yeah, I believe currently, recently I was involved with the inventory of bathrooms at our secondary level. He's definitely ready for me to get off. In order to identify the menstrual devices, right? So we have dispensaries that we are required to provide. And in that inventory, that what we've done is we've identified how the bathrooms are being used. And from what I've understood from discussing this with various principals, building managers, custodial staff, are that bathrooms are available. In other words, bathrooms aren't limited necessarily, let's say, strictly for staff. Staff bathrooms might be located in certain sections of the building, but single-use bathrooms are available. Now, I think maybe Jeff might be able to shed additional light on this because of the recent construction that has taken place and how design and construction is addressing that, moving forward with our new buildings. But it's my understanding that any bathroom is accessible and is not locked if it's a single-use bathroom. I don't believe that they're identified as gender. It's just identified as a bathroom. So
Okay, and I don't mean to get into it tonight, but I just think we need to put it on the radar in case it's something that we look for.
Yeah, I think it is something we should look for because I think different principals do different things. And essentially, we set up a policy probably 3 years ago that we were going to, on all single-use bathrooms, they were going to be called toilet. And we were going to have a lock on them that was always unlocked from the outside. And it was kind of like the Trader Joe's occupied, unoccupied, or vacant, whatever. And that's what we've been using as our standard. And we've been giving advice to principals. And we were working, with Jim's department over the years to make modifications in some buildings. But we're getting some pushback from some principals that want staff only. And in fact, Cardinal just opened with, you have to have a pass card to get into the single-use toilets. But, there we're all set at Cardinal, for instance, with the tall partitions, that all of the toilets that currently say girls and boys or men's and women's can eventually just be toilet and toilet for the gang use toilets. So, we do have a policy that we've been trying to follow. But for instance, at the Ed Center, with the influence of Washington Liberty, we were going to make all of the toilets that way. They're going to actually have one on each floor that's staff and one on each floor that's just toilet. So I think we should put it on there. Is gender neutral facilities available? I think could be a simple list item.
Oh, I put it under accessible. I should put that under toilets.
You're just flush with excitement.
I am.
While we're talking about toilets, is there something in general about like how easily located a toilet is? Like, in other words, are they evenly spread out amongst the building so that someone doesn't have to like run all the way across the building to between classes? Or maybe that's not a thing
We all
anymore.
make sure we put them all on the 4th floor. We try to make sure every floor has one, or every wing has one, is what we typically do with new facilities. But again, it's the culture of the building. We're finding that there are differences in buildings. So, I don't know how the policy ended up being implemented, because I wasn't involved with every building when the policy was set up.
Jeff, you saved money on PE teachers when you put them all on the 4th floor, right?
Yes. Yes, but we have higher laundering bills. The water usage goes up.
Yeah, it's in some of the older schools, with the information that I've gathered and just sort of looked over, there is they're not as readily available. If we look at the Heights, I mean, the Heights is probably one of the, for that,
most lighted buildings we have.
yeah, for that use that you're describing, Rosa. Whereas it's right, there's one. It's pretty accessible. But if you go to Williamsburg, there's a, and in my, and I know this is off topic of all this, but it's very strange. There are some bathrooms located in places that you wouldn't think a bathroom would be located, and kind of odd. So I found these sort of hidden toilet rooms, I guess you would call them, that I'm just kind of scratching my head, like, why is this even here? But yeah, not sure how many people know of some of them.
Well, one of the things with Williamsburg, with the security entrance and the modification of the office, there will be 4 single-use toilets in the main corridor right at the admin area. But they have very few toilets for staff at that building. Currently, I think they have 2.
Excellent. All right. Well, Lisa definitely got us over time talking about
Thanks,
toilets.
Lisa.
Almost as hot a topic as yes, that's exactly what it was, Lisa. So in Ham, spoiler, if you're ever in the boiler room and you find that you have to go to the bathroom, there is a single-use toilet back in the corner. I was just like, what is? Yeah, it's very strange. It's very similar to like what you see in these, like, we used to have a toilet in our basement here, just a single toilet next to the washer and dryer. And I'm always just like, so that's very convenient, I guess, when you're doing laundry. I don't know, but
Michael, you're going with the flow, aren't you?
yeah, I am.
Oh, no. Michael, you have to ask who was doing the laundry and why they needed their own toilet.
Yeah, I can't go back in time for that one, Lois. But yeah, it's very strange. Anyway, all right. Thank you all. I appreciate everyone taking the time and the additional time that we used in order to discuss that hot topic.
Rosa, can you go on for just for a minute at the end? Thanks.
Yep.
And I'll send out this stuff tomorrow to everyone. Thank you.
Michael,
Everyone have a good night.
Yeah. Wait.
Michael, quick
Lois,
question.
get warm.
What's up?
What was that?
I said, Lois, get warm.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you want us to look over that equity stuff again, or I wasn't sure if we had a homework assignment. What was our homework assignment?
So what I will be doing is I'll be sending out the proposed ranking system that we just reviewed. We went over the one category, which was the building, and we have 3 additional ones to review. Just want you to just get your eyes fresh on it. Like, in other words, just sort of be familiar with it. It's not like, you have to peruse the document. But, just sort of, okay, yeah, that looks right. This doesn't look right. As for the equity issue or consideration, I would just like everyone to sort of think of some questions that we want to propose to Dr. Otley as to how equity fits within the built environment. Because when we're discussing this is a addition renovation project. And I want to make sure that we're able to quantify that. And I feel as though when it comes to equity, it's very, emotional about stuff. Anyone, I'm sorry to say, but you can make an argument either way, if that's, lack of a better term, for something being equitable. It's possible. And I just don't want us to sort of, flounder and go back and forth on that. Perfect example, asked my wife tonight, if you had to do a facility, what's your favorite facility, school facility in APS? And you know what her answer was to that? Madison Center. She loves the Madison Center. It's not a school facility anymore. And I was just like, well, what are you talking? She's like, oh, I just love that old building. I love the way it looks. I love the feel of it. It's very nostalgic to me. And I was like, so you would like that building as something that could be replicated, like this isn't something that you feel that needs improvement? And she's like, no, I don't. I don't feel that at all. So I might be like, oh, I like Cardinal. That's what I want to see as a new facility. And I'm just very concerned that if we go down the route of equity without guidelines, that we're just going to be going around in these circles as to, like, David, you might like this, I might like that. And I want us to at least have some sort of focus. And I'm hoping that he'll be able to provide that. I know that's a long-winded way to go about it, but
No, that's a good way to do it. I mean, think about it. If this small group of people is challenged to define what equity means to us, imagine what'll happen when it gets to the board.
yeah, and agreed. And I think that is the case too, like with different communities and neighborhoods themselves. Some people might be, very pleased with what they have in as their school facility, right? But some others might just say, well, no, I want it to be all shiny and pretty. Like I'm aesthetics person.
Yeah, we have to filter.
Yeah.
Really boil it down to critical factors. No, this will be good. So he's going to join us when?
That we don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
So Kathy had some preliminary discussions with him on it. She met him just right before the break. She went down to Syfax and 101 and sort of gave him this, and he was well, he was, oh yeah, I could do that, and come out and have the discussion. We just need to check it with his schedule, and that's why I wanted to provide him with some some questions that we might come up with, which might make it easier for him to show up.
Yeah.
A little bait and hook,
Right. Actually, we should throw him all sorts of terrible ideas. Then he'll be like, oh my God, these people need my help.
That's it. That's a winning strategy.
Throw that curveball in there, David. I like that.
Michael, stop them. Stop them now. I'll be right over.
All right, everyone. Thank you all. Have a good
Good
evening.
night.
Good night.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.